Thank you for joining us for the first ever virtual natural service training conference. My name is Kyra Esgate, and I serve as the CEO of America's Service Commissions, or ASC as we are commonly known. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today. We have more than 1,600 attendees joining us virtually this week, representing 52 state and territorial service commissions and hundreds of AmeriCorps programs from across the United States. We encourage you to say hi in the chat and share where you are logging in from today. We welcome you all. This year's conference is the result of a unique partnership and collaboration across state lines to support the continued learning and training of national service programs. 39 service commissions pooled their resources to make this year's conference possible. So let's give them a big collective thank you. Thank you, commissions. We have 4 days of top-notch learning planned for you through workshops and general sessions to inspire and improve your work. Please take advantage of your time here to learn and strive for continuous improvement to make your virtual conference experience effective, efficient, and impactful. In addition to the workshops, I hope you'll take some time to network and get to know others, as your peers are often your greatest resource. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for their support in bringing us together virtually this week, especially our 2 gold sponsors. First, Inspiring Service, activating the next generation of volunteers. And secondly, America Learns, home of the AmeriCorps Impact Suite, now making member files a breeze and about to do the same for financial reporting. We're also thankful to our silver sponsors, Do Good, Be Good, your source for flexible and interactive virtual team building and training options. Galaxy Digital, creator of Get Connected, the best volunteer management software in the galaxy for organizations building impactful volunteer programs. On3 Learn, on-demand learning for all of your AmeriCorps needs. Encore Reports, proud provider of software to 36 state commissions and more than 650 AmeriCorps programs. And the SysG Group, a consulting and nonprofit group providing strategic resources for mission-driven work. Please help show them some love by visiting all of their expo booths over the next few days and getting to know their products and services and how they can help your organization take your impact to the next level. Our theme for this year's conference is Take Action and Persevere, language that comes from the AmeriCorps Pledge that each member takes at the beginning of their term of service. Through this theme, we will recognize challenges members, programs, and commissions have faced this past year, as we have all persevered through a global pandemic and significant changes to our day-to-day work. In addition, we acknowledge the continued fight for racial equity that garnered increased momentum in the past year. As the National Association for State Service Commissions, ASC is committed to our role in advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in our network. And I hope you will join us to continue your personal learning this week by attending one or more of our workshops in our track of sessions on relevant topics related to how we can and need to improve in this area in the national service and volunteer field. It has been a challenging year in more ways than one, yet national service programs have responded and demonstrated their significant contribution to ensuring local communities are resilient. I want to take a moment to thank each of you here with us today for your role in responding to the impacts of COVID-19. Whether your program shifted to supporting students virtually, assisted with providing meals to neighbors, or coordinated contact tracing and vaccine clinics, national service and volunteer programs have been central to responding to every type of situation one can imagine this past year. If you have not already, I invite you to learn more about the role of AmeriCorps members and volunteers in responding to COVID-19 through our recent publication, which can be found on the ASK website at www.statecommissions.org. Even though we're virtual this week, there are a lot of ways to engage through our 4-day conference. Don't forget to engage with us on social media. You can join the conversation using our conference hashtag, #TakeActionPersevere. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our opening keynote, Ashley C. Ford. Ashley is a writer, host, and educator who lives in Indianapolis, Indiana with her husband, poet and fiction writer Kelly Stacy, and their chocolate lab, Astro Renegade Ford Stacy. What a great name. Stacy's memoir, Somebody's Daughter, will be published by Flatiron Books on June 1st, 2021, which is just around the corner. Ford is the former host of the Chronicles of Now podcast, co-host of the HBO companion podcast, Lovecraft Country Radio, as well as seasons 1 and 3 of MasterCard's Fortune Favors the Bold, also the video interview series Profile by BuzzFeed News, and finally, Brooklyn-based news and culture TV show 112 BK. Ashley is a proud AmeriCorps alum of the Midwest Campus Compact Citizen Scholar Program, known as M3C, an education award-only AmeriCorps program administered by Wisconsin Campus Compact, which served 10 states, including Indiana. The program supported low-income and first-generation college students and sought to develop a peer network that enabled these students to serve as agents of civic engagement to respond effectively to local community issues. Ashley served as an M3C AmeriCorps member during the 2005-2006 program year as part of an after-school literacy tutoring site in Muncie, Indiana. And with that, please help me in welcoming in the chat box, Ashley Ford. Ashley.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction, first of all. Every time somebody reads my bio, I get really confused because I actually forget that I did all those things. That's not true. I don't forget, but I don't think about them every day. So it's nice to hear that I've maybe been up to something, even when I didn't think I was. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm so excited to talk with you. Before we get started, I want you to know this. I don't use slides. I don't think there's anything wrong with using slides. I don't think that slides are a bad thing in any way, but I have ADHD and slides, even the ones I make myself, distract me. So I'm just gonna talk to you. I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you about who I am. I'm going to tell you about where I come from, what I come from. I'm going to tell you why I'm here. And hopefully at the end of my little talk, you'll feel like you made the right decision and that you are in exactly the right place. I already know you are, but I'm going to try to convince you. So let's start with who I am. My name is Ashley Cassandra Ford. I am from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm 34 years old. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I'm someone's wife. I am a dog mom. And most importantly, I am my own. I am a person who tries to move through the world as if I am in control of my person in the ways that I am. I know we can't control everything, but there are steps to being able to know what you believe, know how to say what you believe, and know how to back that up with action. So we'll get to all of that. I went to a high school with about 400 kids. I graduated in a class of 87 kids. We were 95% Black in my district. We were pretty terribly underfunded as a school, as these things go. And I did not think I was going to go to college. I didn't think about college very much. I was a good student, but where I come from, not a lot of people got the opportunity to go to college. Even fewer could afford it. And I was definitely on that end of the people who just assumed they wouldn't be able to afford it. I filled out the FAFSA. I was awarded some grants. I luckily won some scholarships from my school, my high school. I was accepted to Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, and I found myself having to go to orientation. One of the things that I'd heard about orientation, or a good thing to do for someone like me who wasn't going to be coming with a family who could support me financially or otherwise, was to look for an on-campus job. And I qualified for work study, which was lucky for me, because one of the work study options they had that year was the Citizen Scholar Program. And as was so beautifully put before, there were some qualifications, some demographic needs in that program, and I was lucky enough to fit them. So how did I hear about the Citizen Scholar Program? At Ball State University in the Office of Student Life, or at least this was true then, I'm not sure that it's absolutely true today, there was something called Student Voluntary Services. And one of the things that students who were there for orientation got to do was walk around places like the Office of Student Life and look for opportunities to involve themselves on campus. And not only did the Office of Student Life and Student Voluntary Services give us a cute little presentation about the ways that students go out into the community surrounding Ball State and help the local people there or people on campus, and in some cases, even further beyond that. But it was also a program that I could make sure that my books and my housing and my tuition were being subsidized in some way, which was a need for me. I, in that moment, was thinking about my need. I was thinking about what I needed in order to move forward, in order to get closer to my goals. And being able to do that while volunteering, technically at the same time, seemed like it was right up my alley. I'd always been involved with volunteering projects when I could in high school, even though my mother frequently told me, I don't understand why you keep talking about helping poor people. We are the poor people. And I knew that. I knew that there was a lack. I knew that there were things that me, my mother, my brothers and sister had to do without. But I also knew that there were always people who had less than us to work with, less resources, less opportunities, less access. And even if we were not in the best place, it seemed to me like we still had the ability to do something about people who were either in the same place as us or somewhere that others would have considered below us. Not that I considered them below us. I kind of hate that language. But I asked for information for applying for the Citizen Scholar Program when I was at summer orientation. I followed up as much as I possibly could because I really wanted to do it. And at the end of the summer, I found out that I had been selected along with 9 other young people to be a part of this program. And I'll tell you this, student voluntary services, student life, all of those things, I think I may have been involved with anyway, but my experience was so enhanced by being part of this little cohort, this little group of people who had been told that because of the circumstances we had grown up in, we didn't have anything to offer to communities who were in need or communities who could just use our help. Very quickly found out that that wasn't the case. I started to make friends in that group. I started to make friends with people who were just in the student voluntary services group, in the student life group. I started to make more friends on campus, period, just because I had a starting place with Citizen Scholars. And then I got to do something really cool. Citizen Scholars also offered us the opportunity to take service trips. And I was not a kid who got to go places very often. There were a few places, there were, a couple family reunions or something like that, but I didn't come from a vacationing family, and I certainly didn't come from a family that traveled places to help other people. I signed up as quickly as I could. I actually used the money I'd made from my second on campus job to pay for the service trip in order to go. And I would spend that money again in a heartbeat. We went to Coretta, West Virginia, which at the time was 5th highest in the country for child poverty. Before we left, we did research on the area. We watched interviews with some of the people who lived in that area. We prepared ourselves with numbers and statistics and how to engage with people when you're helping them. But there was nothing to prepare any of us, I think, for the fact that we would encounter people who changed us. That was certainly true for me. Coretta, West Virginia was the first place that I saw poverty in an area that was almost exclusively white. It was the first time that I'd seen an entire town, cities decimated by poverty and abandoned by every system you would think was set up to help them. It was devastating to visit the home of someone that was a FEMA trailer that they had been living in for years, a trailer that was covered in black mold, a trailer that was still in a floodplain and frequently flooded, a trailer with 2 bedrooms where 6 people lived, a space heater in the middle of the trailer that was about maybe 10 minutes from incinerating the place. And knowing that for this family, this was not their tragedy, this was their home, and this was their best option. And my only job in that moment was to make it as lovely as I could for them. To remember that people who are living in undignified circumstances are not people who don't deserve dignity. Another thing that I learned on that trip was that the people who have the least are the people who are most likely to offer it to others. I walked into FEMA trailers and homes that were very close to falling down, homes without insulation, children who had never had birthday parties. And every single person I encountered offered me their last. I walked into a home where everyone inside was not only gathered in the living room, covered in blankets, but the back half of the home was just a sheet of plastic that had been set up to just keep the wind directly off of them. And when I walked into that house, every single one of those people under those blankets uncovered themselves, walked over to me, shook my hand, said hello, and offered me cookies, tea, whatever they had. It wasn't until we were leaving Coretta and I was thinking about our experience there, me and my friends, that I realized how much I had in common with these people. Not necessarily in the circumstances of our lives, not necessarily in the color of our skin or the money we had in our pockets. But these were not people who said to me, I have nothing. What else can you give me? These were people who said, I have very little. And because you are here in my home and we are together, you can share it with me. I'd never seen anything like that from anyone. I'd never had an experience like that. While putting siding on people's homes and throwing a massive birthday party for every kid we could find, while cleaning out trailers and yards and backyards and side yards and putting all that stuff onto the back of a big truck and taking it to a dump and then getting all that trash off the dump, into the dump, I'm sorry, off the truck and into the dump. My body was working, my mind was working, and my heart was working. And my heart was telling me, it really doesn't matter what you come from or where you come from. Your mom was wrong. She's a lovely woman, but she was wrong. You're not too poor to help. Nobody is too poor to help. Nobody is too rich to help. We all have a place. We all have a part. I thought of myself as powerless when I got to Coretta. And I left Coretta not feeling particularly powerful, but with a better understanding of the power that I had and an even stronger need to be responsible with it. And that's where I want to go next. I want to talk to you about power and responsibility. I realize now that society is really, really good, at least mainstream society, really, really good at convincing us that what we want is more and more and more power. And just the one definition of power, just power over, not shared power, not power to, power over. We want power over our lives. We want power over the lives of our children. We want power over the lives of our spouses. We want power over the lives of our children. We want power over the lives of people in our community. We want power. We want to be able to say what goes. We want to be able to say when it goes. And if it doesn't happen the way we want it to, we want to complain and we want it to mean something when we do. I believe that power is directly proportionate to responsibility. That's what I believe. I believe there is no such thing as gaining all this power, wanting all this power over yourself, over your life, whatever, if you don't also want the responsibility. What are you going to do with all that power and no responsibility to yourself, to your family, to your community, to your world? It bothers me a lot when I hear someone say, well, I wasn't paying attention to how this was being done, but now I am upset about how it affects me. Because that's what we're taught. We are taught to rule. We are taught to lead in the most surface definition of that word. And we are not taught that every freedom we have, all the little powers we have every day, make us responsible to someone. If you're worried about education in your community, then you're responsible. If you're worried about policing in your community, then you're responsible. And I don't say responsible and culpable. Not necessarily. But if you abdicate your responsibility as you hoard power, then you are culpable for the outcomes, for what you see in your daily life, for what you experience in your community. If you're worried about how desperate people might behave in your neighborhood and the power you may not have to control them, remove them, that's a hard one. That's a sad one, to want to remove people who are not living in ways that we see fit. Happens a lot. So what do you do about it? You start figuring out how to make sure there are less desperate people, less cause for desperation. You dig down into the root. You find it and you heal from there. That becomes your responsibility. You want the power of living in a community where people love and respect and care for and serve one another, then it is your responsibility to make sure that the opportunities to love and connect and respect and care for and serve one another are there. Does that mean you have to do it all yourself? Absolutely not. That's the power of community. That's the power of shared power. Because it's not all meant for you. It's not all meant for me. It's definitely not all meant for politicians or religious leaders. It's supposed to be for all of us. And if we all have a little bit of that power, then we've all got a little bit of responsibility. So what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with it? My power, or one form of a power that I have, is speaking. I speak all over the place. I love to do it. I've always loved to do it. It's not really anything new. Though I hope I've gotten better at it over time. We hope these things. But because my voice and being able to use my voice is powerful, my responsibility is to speak up when necessary. My responsibility is to do the work when necessary. And doing the work is going to be, people always say, what do you mean when you say do the work? Doing the work means something different for every person because every person has different values, different gifts, and different ways of going about things. One of the things that I try to keep in mind is that it is not good enough to just complain, at least for me. I think some people get a lot more out of complaining than I do. But for me, it is never going to be enough just to complain. If something upsets me, I want to use my voice and I want to do something about it. Now, there are people who would say that a large social following, having a certain amount of influence on the internet is a kind of power, and it absolutely can be. So I have to think about what to do with the little bit of power that I have in that space. I'm going to give you two examples of times that I complained and then turned those complaints into action. One of those times was in the summer of 2014, when I think we all know about the uprisings in Ferguson, Missouri. and what happened there. One of the things I noticed as I was watching the news about the situation was that people, especially journalists who I knew, and also some teachers who were in that area, congregated at the local library. They congregated there because it was neutral, safe space. Nobody was going to harm the library. When I started reading about this library, about who was there, about what was happening there, I realized that the library was pretty badly underfunded. And even as they continued to stay open and remain a safe space for journalists, for teachers, for kids when schools were closed and parents still had to go to work, they were underfunded. They didn't have the resources they needed or the access that they needed. I helped lead a campaign online after complaining a lot, I promise you. I helped lead a campaign online to raise almost $500,000 for the Ferguson Library. And they were able to hire a children's librarian full-time for the first time. They were able to get help with their website through those donations. And I, luckily, was able to meet the sole librarian at that facility. He came to New York when I was living there to meet me. We got cheesecake. It was amazing. And I realized that my complaints, my fury had power sometimes. And that my community online was powerful. And that if that was true, then I had a responsibility to use that power in ways that made sense to me and that served larger communities. A few years later, I read a quote from a politician who talked about the fact that he'd spoken to a kid. I don't really believe this, but I'm going to say it anyway, that he'd spoken to a kid who said that they did not want free lunch because they wanted a lunch that offered them dignity. I was a free lunch kid, no surprise there. My mom, the single parent of 4 children, rarely, if ever, had to pay for lunch or breakfast at school. I don't know if there are other people listening or watching who have been free lunch or reduced lunch kids, but I'm guessing that when you were hungry in the morning or in the middle of the day, the last thing on your mind was dignity or how someone else would perceive your need. And if that was the case for you, I'm guessing that it didn't come from inside you. I'm guessing that someone else said or did something that suddenly made you feel like eating at school was in some way, I'm sorry, this makes me really upset, that it was in some way telling about who you are or who your parents are or who your family was or what you come from. It's not. So I read this and then I found out about something called lunch debt, which is when a student in a school, elementary school, high school, middle school, whatever, could accrue debt by eating every day and not having enough money to pay for it. And the student can be punished for this debt by anything from not being able to eat lunch anymore, to being given an alternate lunch that is 2 pieces of white bread and a slice of cheese between them and a milk, to not being able to attend homecoming or prom, or in some cases, graduation. And the thought of this upset me so much, and I wanted to complain about it so bad that we raised about $300,000 across the country to pay off lunch debts um, in different schools. And the only reason I stopped that campaign is because at this point, I have to recognize that even though we have the power to pay off these debts for kids and to feed kids, as we should do anyway, um, it should also not be the responsibility of individuals when we have a tax system set up that could very easily pay for this without us. So it's not that I don't think people shouldn't pay children's lunch debts anymore. It's that I don't think lunch debt should be a thing. And I think we have to take care of that at a federal level. That's just me, my opinion. My power and my responsibility will always be proportionate. It doesn't matter if I didn't ask for the power I have. It doesn't matter if no one ever told me what to do with the power I have. What matters is that because it's there, if I can learn to wield it, then I can learn to wield it for good. And I can learn to wield it for others. I can serve myself, my family, my community, my world in ripples for the rest of my life if only I recognize what is inside me, how it moves in the world, and how to move it intentionally. I'm guessing that's what you want to do. I'm guessing that's why you're here. You know that you have the ability to give, to serve, to help. You probably know, just like I learned in Coretta, that your ability to help has nothing to do with what you've come from. Your ability to help has everything to do with who you want to be, how you want to be, and where you want to spread your gifts. Those gifts are your power. And your responsibility is to care for the world around you with that power. That's what I want for you. And a bonus, a very special bonus, this is how you're going to meet your people. Not necessarily in this program, not necessarily on a college campus, but what a program like this does is help you solidify your values. Before I was a citizen scholar, I think I had a lot of good ideas. When I left the program, I had values. I had things that I believed about humanity and about our rights that will never change, that I will hold on to for the rest of my life. And because I have those values and because I feel strong in those values, I've met so many people who have the same values, who want the same things, who think very similarly to the way I do in that respect. The friends I made in Coretta, West Virginia, when I was 19 years old, are the friends I went camping with this past weekend at 34, with their children, with my husband, with our dogs. And yeah, it turned into a little bit of a service trip. We can't help it. We started picking up around the place. It's important to us. But it was fun the whole time. And it was fun the whole time because we understood that we shared this value. We know and we try so hard to remain aware of our power. And because we are aware of our power, when we move to be responsible to each other, to the land, nobody's surprised. Everybody just pitches in to help because that's the way it should be. So I want to end this by asking you, how will you be responsible with your power? How are you going to use the gifts that you have? How are you going to make this world better, not just for you, but for everyone around you? And I'm not going to ask you to answer that question today, but I am going to ask you to think about it every day, because that's probably how you're going to find out who you are, what you can do, and where you'll be most useful, most loved, and most at home. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you listening to me for that long. That's like a record. I hope you're all okay. Take a breath. And if you've got questions, let's do it.
Thanks so much, Ashley. I think, again, everyone take a breath, but wow, that was really an inspiring, impactful. And thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your story about finding your voice and the role that services had in helping you develop that voice. So we do have a few questions that we did want to pose to you to kind of dive in a little bit deeper into some of the themes that you just shared with us. And then we will close out our opening plenary today with some of those notorious housekeeping announcements that I get to share with folks as well. But before we go there, did want to have a little bit of dialogue with you. So we've obviously talked about your AmeriCorps member service experience, and you also talked about finding your voice. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit more how you feel your service as an AmeriCorps member really helped you find your voice and start to really develop how you are showing up in the world today and really talking about your theme about power equals responsibility. I think that that's really powerful, and wondering how, again, your member service experience helped you start to develop that voice.
Right. Well, I think one of the things I realized really quickly in AmeriCorps, not necessarily in the Citizen Scholar Program, because so many of us came from such similar backgrounds and circumstances. But once you get out into the world and once you start having more conversations, you realize that quite a few people who have decided to work in the service space or in the nonprofit space are not people who have ever needed the services of a nonprofit or a service organization. And they have certain ideas, in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, they have certain ideas about what it's like to be a person who lives in poverty, what it's like to be a person who is the victim of a natural disaster, what it's like to be a person who just comes from instability in one way or another. And it's really nice to have a person in that room who has actually been through those things, because they're going to have insights and they're going to have thoughts that others may have not considered. In a lot of cases, I was the person in that room. And I realized quickly that if I did not speak up, mistakes would be made, marks would be missed. That there would be communities we were hoping to serve who would instead end up offended by the attempt. And that came from miscommunication. That came from just not having people in the room who would know to ask the questions that usually end up somewhere in a gray area. But because of how I grew up and what I've seen and what I've been through, I know that the gray area is where all the meat is. That's where all the juice is. That's where the real comments are. That's where the real needs are. And I like to dig into that space. So it wasn't just that, like, oh, I like being in this space or nobody knows this like me. It's that I found that not only was I able to articulate my experiences or the experiences of people I knew, I was also able to advocate for them in those situations. And being an advocate wasn't something I necessarily expected, but it was such a good use of what I considered at the time, like not so much a gift as much as an affliction, which is the fact that it's really hard for me to stop talking. Um, and that just continued. I realized that, if you have an issue where you're worried that you're not going to be able to stop talking, a really good way to get around that is to write things down. And writing things down has been my bread and butter. And being able to communicate that way has really helped me not just see the power that I have in my voice, or the potential for power in my voice, but also like I can make things better for the people who need and want it most, even when those people include me. And I want to be able to do that forever. So I just keep going.
Well, that's great. We're glad that you do keep going, because again, your voice is very inspirational. So you've addressed this a little bit already, but I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper on your service experience and kind of what you learned. So you talked about your time, going to West Virginia. You talked about, I think I love hearing that you just were this past weekend camping with people that you served with. Like, that's amazing that, you've had that experience. But when you think about that year of service, what did you learn? Or what do you think perhaps your those that you served with, that you're still in contact with, what did they learn that really helps propel all of you forward at this point in time?
I think two of the big things that we all learned, I wouldn't say this was just me, I would also say this was my friends who were part of student voluntary services with me, and the Citizen Scholar Program in some cases. Two of the things that we learned really quickly was that, one, you have to listen to people. You have to listen to people even as you're helping them. You cannot come into these situations thinking of yourself in any way as a savior, thinking of yourself as, like a person who has made better decisions than these people. That is often not the case. You've got to leave judgment at the door, whatever judgments you have, because the truth of the matter is you don't know these people. And these people, these communities, they can smell your lack of curiosity from across the room. This is never their first time at the rodeo. This might be your first time dealing with a community, but it is never a community's first time dealing with people who come in to help. And some of those places have set up a hard time for you. And now these people are wary and they don't know if you're really here to help or here to do something else. So there is a trust that has to be earned. You can't walk into that situation judging people. You have to walk into that situation ready to earn their trust. So that's number one. And number two is earning the trust of people who you seek to help is probably one of the most satisfying personal feelings you will ever have in your entire life, because they don't really owe you anything. They don't. But what they give you when you earn their trust is another closer connection to your own humanity that you can't get to on your own. That is a shared gift. That is a gift between people that you'll never be able to cultivate for yourself. And it's worth it every time. Every time you have it, it's worth it.
Great. Again, some really profound words and thoughts there. So knowing that we're kind of running short on time, I wanted just one more question for us to kind of wrap up our time with you today, Ashley. And just so everyone knows as well, Ashley's going to be joining us tomorrow as well. She is going to be facilitating a panel of AmeriCorps alumni. So I'm super excited about that. And I think that's going to be a really great conversation. But speaking about alumni, right? So obviously to be an alum, you have to have been a member. And I know that it was a bit ago, but when you think about your own member experience, again, we are convening over 1,600 folks that are running AmeriCorps programs, that are at state service commissions. So they're thinking about recruiting and supporting members during that term of service so that they can be successful there. So I wonder if you have any thoughts or suggestions for our audience this week about how to improve the AmeriCorps member experience so that young people really can grow from this experience and learn from it, and really then live lives of service as they move on to whatever's next for them in their career.
The best thing you can do is pay attention and help them make the connections, I think. You
Mhm.
know, things are going to be happening to them emotionally and in real time that they don't necessarily recognize as being profound. And you can help them get there. You can help them understand the impact of their service in a way that maybe doesn't necessarily compute at first. You know, a lot of the people who end up doing things that are service are not necessarily people who want to be saviors. A lot of them are people who kind of want to be invisible, and people who, you know, think this is all I can do is help. And, you know, they think of themselves as a little inconvenience and burdensome. And it is so important to be able to show them that not only do they have power, but their power is working. It's like if you notice that someone's tutoring a child and they're, you know, frustrated, but you know that that child is getting it and you know that it's getting better, let them know. Point out to them, you know, when we got here, he couldn't write his name.
Mhm.
And now I know it's frustrating that, you know, you're trying to get him to like understand this sentence and he's not really there yet. But remember what you've done. Remember how far you come. And also remember that the point of service, even though it is so great when you feel that stuff back, when you really feel your impact, like it is fantastic. But the point of service ultimately is not for you to feel that impact. That's a byproduct. The point of service is for you to be who you intend to be in the world. If you want to be a person who believes that children deserve an education that allows them not only to learn, but remain curious about the world, then when you show up with that intention, you're doing your job. You're doing everything you can do. Not everybody is going to react the way you want. Their outcomes are not always going to be what you want, but you will be exactly who you want to be. And not enough people can say that. That alone sets you apart. So make sure you let people know that like there is growth when you see growth. And also let them know that if they didn't see growth this time in the subject or in the person who they have offered their service to, that that's not automatically a loss because you saw something in you. You got something out of you. You showed up today, and that's a win.
Thank you. I think that those are really wise words for our program staff as well as commission staff to be thinking about, and really appreciate your point about really encouraging that curiosity and really building trust as well. So again, I want to ask everybody to show your love for Ashley in the chat box. Again, really appreciate your time with us today, Ashley, and look forward to our conversation continuing tomorrow with our AmeriCorps alumni panel.
I'm
So
looking
I'm
forward
going to
to
move
it
us
too.
on now. Going to move us on to just those few housekeeping things so that you can actually go off to your first session for the day. So before we take our first break, I do have again those housekeeping announcements. So first, we want to hope everyone will take the time to be present in sessions throughout the next 4 days. We know you are all very busy national service professionals, and we appreciate what that means, but we do want to encourage you to take advantage of the breadth of workshops that are available for you to learn and grow in your work. We also encourage you to the degree possible to encourage you to close your windows on your computer to avoid distractions. Second, to encourage engagement throughout our virtual event, we have created a conference activity book. So if you are one of the first lucky 1,100 participants to register, you'll be receiving a hard copy of our activity book in the mail in the next day or so. So we encourage you to use that book to track your participation. And you're also going to find lots of other fun activities as well as our bingo card. So until you receive your book, again, in the next day or so, you can visit the ASC exhibitor booth in the expo area to download a copy of the bingo card. We encourage you to start working on the activities to get a bingo, and we will be randomly selecting 5 individuals who will complete their bingo card to win a $150 electronic gift card of your choice. The winners will be announced at the end of the closing plenary on Friday, and you must be present to win. All right, so get going on those bingo cards. And again, you can get your bingo card in the Ask exhibitor booth until your book arrives in the mail. We would also like to invite our AmeriCorps State Program colleagues to join us this evening for networking beginning at 5:15 p.m. Eastern. At 5:15, we encourage you to click into the networking tab in your module and to begin meeting with your AmeriCorps program colleagues. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You've got about a 14-minute break now, and then the first block of workshops will begin promptly at 2:15 p.m. Eastern. I hope that everyone has a great day, and may the 4th be with you, everyone.